So here's the news, gang. I've got news to give you today, and this has been 1 year in the making. I haven't had this result for 1 year. 7 out of 7. 100%. 7 out of 7. 100%, my friends. And I have to say to you, it has been probably since April, May last year that I can't recall any period after that where I got 100%. And here's my view. So firstly, let me just answer the question on prices. Prices, I'm not going to say the prices were great. I'm not going to say the prices were terrible. The prices were on the mark. The vendors are listening to the market. And I've never ever seen a market where the vendors don't need that much convincing, because thanks to the television in Australia, the newspapers in Australia, the digital platforms that cover news, they have done the job. They've scared everyone. And so has Mr. Arrogant, Dr. Lowe from the Reserve Bank. Before I move on to real estate, let me just tell you a little bit about this guy. So I Googled him and I studied a little bit about this gentleman. And the reason I did it, he really annoyed me this week when one of the people that was grueling him, I think he was a Greens or might have been a Labor person, I'm not quite sure. And he was asked, why should you keep your job when you told people a year ago rates would not be going up to 2024 at the earliest, and then you've put them up 9 times in a row? He wasn't to know. I understand that. He wasn't to know. But he's made 2 errors, and I'm going to tell you what they are. Error number 1. Don't say something if you're not 1,000,000% certain. And he did. He said they're not going up to 2024. And yes, there are vulnerable people that made decisions based on that. The second thing, he's on 1 million a year. It's 980 plus some small bonuses, right? Not much. He's on $1 million a year. When you're on $1 million a year, right, and you are working essentially for the government, right? It's a government job, right? My friend, you got to show a bit of empathy, because your salary is being provided by the taxpayer. So when someone says to you, should you keep your job, and his response is a cold, brash, arrogant, I've got a 7-year contract and I'm not going anywhere. That's more or less what he said. Disgraceful. Disgraceful to say that, to sort of say, you can't get rid of me because I've got a 7-year contract. Disgraceful. Show some empathy. Be a little bit compassionate, right? I'm not blaming you for what's happening. I'm blaming you for some of the things that you've done. But for God's sake, when you're paid by the Australian public, you sit there and you show some empathy when you're talking to people, and not say, ha, 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 I got a 7-year contract. Anyway, you can tell I'm angry about it, and I've been on him for many, many months. So let's talk about what's happening in real estate. Why did we get 7 out of 7? Do I think the market has turned? No, I don't. It's too early to call. One thing for sure is that there's a lot of buyers out there. And they're not pulling the trigger, but they're there. There is significantly more buyers out there at opens and at auctions than there was. They're not pulling the trigger and going crazy. But what they're doing is they're doing their due diligence. Because I think the public know that we are at the afternoon of the rate rises. Even if there's another 4 at 0.25%, that's 1%. I think people are factoring that in, and what they're doing is they're going out there and they're sussing things out because they know the end is near and they want to be an educated buyer, right? So they're not jumping in but they're having a look because there's a group of buyers out there, and what they try and do is they try to buy at the bottom. And right now, they're sitting intently and they're watching to see how far we're away from the bottom. Couple of other things that are obvious in this market. We've got a rate rise that's created buying capacity to drop by 27% versus May last year. So if you had 1 million to spend in May, you've got roughly 750. The issue that we have is the $1 million house hasn't dropped to 750, which we've spoken about before. So borrowing capacity has dropped more than houses have dropped. So unfortunately, if you're a buyer, you're not that much better off if you're borrowing significantly to finance your purchase. There he lies the problem, because you turn around and say, well, if borrowing capacity has dropped by 27%, it stands to reason that properties will eventually drop at that level because buyers don't have the money. And what is going to happen is if vendors want to sell their property, they're going to have to meet what borrowers can go up to. So that's logical. Here's the thing in the jigsaw puzzle that confuses everything. Get ready for it. There's not a lot of stock on the market, and people don't have to sell. And the reason is, at the moment, there's no distress selling. So the lack of distress selling and the lower supply of stock is keeping prices at a higher level than what borrowing capacity has dropped. And that's why I think to myself, I don't think we're going to get much of a price drop from here on. Maybe a little bit. But you need to understand this. The average vendor, even though they're not happy about the rate rises going up, unemployment is so low, it's basically not existent. And what it basically means, that even if your mortgage goes up by $500, $1,000 a month, you can pick up work and make up for it. There's part-time work extra hours, pick up a side hustle. And those are the factors that are going to stop people, my friends, from actually having to worry about selling. Now, I'm just going to open up this text message. If you can just bear with me for one moment. I'm going to open up the Ray White results, which they do more auctions than anyone else as a group across Australia, had a 70% clearance approximately in New South Wales. So that's 70%. That's a pretty decent clearance. Thanks, Alex. So team, I've got to say to you, hey, Paulie Biller's still very upset because I beat him in backgammon. I didn't beat him in backgammon. I smashed him in backgammon. In fact, anyone wants to take me on in backgammon, I've got to tell you, the way my brain calculates those dice, I'll be very hard to beat. That's right, I beat him 7-1. So team, that's the state of the real estate market. And I've got to say to you that we have got till Easter, another 4, 5, 6 weeks, where we're going to get a clearer picture on this. And my final comments are, just real estate agents. Man, I've been harping on it for a week or two now. Listen, just tell the damn truth, my friends. You can have one story to vendor and buyer if you're skilled enough. This crap that goes on where you tell buyers it's going to sell for a lower figure just to get them there, and then you tell vendors a higher figure to get the listing. Learn the skill and the art of communicating and giving people and saying, hey, I want to let you know, this is, to the vendor, this is where I think the property fits. You want a little bit more? Let's go for it. My job is to try and find someone that has the same opinion of value as you. As long as you're aware is that this is what the comparables are, and to a buyer, just say, I want to let you know, our owners are hoping to get as much as they can, obviously, but I've got to tell you, this is where we think the comparable sales are. And I can tell you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, during the process, normally market value is what comes through. So team, let's finish off. And I'm listening at the moment. There's a guy that inspires me. Everyone reckons that the guy's off his face on drugs. I don't think he is, because I've gone in and I've watched him perform on videos in the Sydney concert in Melbourne, talking about Post Malone. and I've watched him perform at other previous concerts. This guy is the ultimate performer, my friends. This guy here does things so much with passion, right? This guy here, my friends, we must carry ourselves in our roles in the same way that Post Malone does. A guy that is obsessed with making sure that he just gives 15 out of 10 in every performance. So team, always remember, make passion your paycheck.